I am super excited today because I'm driving a Jaguar F-Type. Full disclosure, I am head over heels for this car and have been ever since it came out. It's one of my favorite sports cars of today, and I haven't driven one in about 4 years. So I'm very excited for the chance to do so again. So why am I driving the F-Type again, you might be asking? Well, it's been given a slight facelift a little while ago, but more to the point, it's been given an all-new engine. Now, one of the things I loved the most about the last F-Type I drove was its mad, loud, beautiful sounding and very powerful supercharged 5-liter V8. So what does this have? A V6? Oh no, it's got a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. And I know what you're thinking, blasphemy, they've gone and ruined it. But don't turn off just yet, because I think we should give this car a chance. But first, I think we need to be properly reacquainted. To me, this is still one of the most heart-achingly beautiful vehicles of the modern era, and maybe a few eras before that too. The long bonnet, the flowing roofline, the curvy haunches, the sharp tail, they all just do it for me. And though the biggest change you'll notice with the facelift are the full LED headlamps, they fit the design perfectly, and unique to this P300 variant is the central exhaust port at the back. Frankly, when a car looks this good, that's half the battle won. But still, I need to know what this new version is like to drive. Let's hit the road. So, let's start with the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the cat in the bag, because this is a Jaguar. It's the same 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine from the Ingenium family that you get in a lot of other Jaguar Land Rover products. Only here it makes a bit more power at 300 horsepower, and it's got 400 Newton meters of torque. It is still mated to the 8-speed automatic gearbox though. Now 300 horsepower and 400 Newton meters, that might seem adequate for a regular SUV or sedan, but in a sports car, it doesn't seem quite enough, does it? Especially not when you're used to this car having upwards of 550 horsepower from a V8. What doesn't help either is that this isn't the lightest of sports cars. At 1525 kg, although it's about 100 kg lighter than the V8 version, it's also nearly 100 kg heavier than the Porsche 718 Cayman. In practice though, it feels sufficient actually, and that's a lot to do with the fact that it's got a nice low-end punch. As soon as you put your foot down, it takes off, and that gives you the sense right away of having enough power on hand. So far so good then. It then continues to pull quite strongly in the mid-range, with power tapering off only once you reach near the 6,500 RPM red line. So yes, while it doesn't feel neck-snappingly quick, and certainly nowhere near as quick as the V8 engine, on its own, getting you from point A to B, it's got just enough grunt to still be fun. Now V8 engines, and especially Jaguar's V8 engines, are not about just the speed, but also about the sensation along the way, and that includes the noise, and of course that's something that's missing from this 4-cylinder engine, unfortunately. When you start out until about 2000 RPM, what you get is this slight mechanical whine and whir. It's really not anything to write home about. But once you get into the 3000 RPM range, do you hear that? Sounds quite nice actually, and it only gets better when you put it into dynamic mode. That's what I'm talking about. Now see this is what a sporty 4-cylinder engine should sound like. I'm looking at you, Porsche. So yes, it's not a V8, it's not that barking mad hurricane of an engine, yet somehow it also works. I'm also happy to report that the F-Type still drives as well as it always did. Now because this isn't the R or the SVR version, there is a lot of compliance in the suspension. It's also not riding on 20-inch wheels, but instead 19-inch wheels, so it's actually quite comfortable. but yet the handling has not been corrupted in the slightest. It still feels incredibly agile and a lot of fun to chuck into corners. It's got that classic front engine rear wheel drive feel, long bonnet stretching out in front of you and you're sat way back.
It's a well-balanced car, and since the engine is so much lighter than the V8, it doesn't feel as nose heavy, and that just serves to improve agility even more.
The other thing about the V8 F-Type is that it was always quite ready and willing to spin out its rear wheels with the slightest provocation. This one, with only 400 Newton meters of torque, is not quite as easy to unstick. The other remarkable thing I've noticed on this drive is the fuel gauge. I've been driving and shooting all of today. We're about an hour and a half outside the city, and last night I took it for a drive just to get a feel for it, and all this time I haven't exactly been holding back. And yet, here we are with about half a tank of fuel. In the V8 F-Type, I'd have probably made 2 trips to the fuel station by now.
Now, if there's one thing I haven't been too much of a fan of with the F-Type, it's the interior, and sadly not much has changed here. Yes, it gives you a sporty feel with its big dials and aggressive driving position. There are also a few cool touches like the push-button glove box release and the AC vents that rise out of the dashboard. But overall, the cabin just lacks that wow factor, both in its design and in its quality, that you get from rivals. What is new with the facelift though is the larger In-Control Touch Pro screen, which does away with the physical buttons altogether. But this too isn't JLR's latest version, and it's feeling a bit dated now.
Now, I was concerned at the start that taking the V8 out of the F-Type would have taken away its soul, but I'm happy to report that all is not lost. Sure, it's not quite as exciting or thrilling or emotional or quick as the V8 version, but it's still a very good car to drive and far more fuel efficient to boot. But no, that is not the best part. The best part is that the 2-liter engine qualifies it for a lower tax bracket, and that means it's a whole lot cheaper.
While the top spec SVR with the supercharged V8 costs 2.65 crore rupees, this one costs less than half of that at 91 lakh rupees. That also means while the SVR is a rival for the Porsche 911 Turbo, this one is a rival for the Porsche 718 Cayman. It's a whole different segment.
What you get for your money is a car that drives really well and is just drop dead gorgeous to look at. And I think that's what Indian sports car buyers would like a lot. So for fans of the F-Type like me, be happy to know that this will likely mean we'll see a lot more of these on our roads.
We've got an interesting comparison for you today, and that's because on paper, the Hero Extreme 200R and the Apache RTR 160 4V don't really add up. So what we're going to do is we're going to start this comparison with something we usually leave for the end, and that's the pricing. The Hero has been priced very competitively at just under 90,000 rupees ex-showroom, which makes it about 10 to 15,000 rupees cheaper than any other 200cc motorcycle that offers ABS. The Apache, on the other hand, this is just above 85,000 rupees ex-showroom, which is a little cheaper than the Hero. But bear in mind that this bike doesn't have ABS as of yet, and TVS is going to have to give it that feature soon enough. So when the RTR 160 gets ABS, it'll probably be as expensive as the Extreme 200, if not more. So like I said, we've got an interesting comparison lined up for you today. These two motorcycles are quite different, but they echo their brand sentiments and DNA. The Apache is sporty and it's the most powerful bike in the 160cc segment, whereas the Extreme 200R takes a more mature approach. Park them next to each other and the difference in the styling approach is also clearly visible. This bike may be called the Extreme, but in typical Hero fashion, it actually follows quite a conventional design that is heavily inspired by its sibling, the Extreme Sports. Now, if it wasn't for those loud graphics in the fuel tank, you probably wouldn't notice it in a parking lot. The Apache, on the other hand, that's also an inspired design, but it comes from the Apache RTR 200, and both these motorcycles are stylish, sporty and aggressive, and to my eyes, that's the more attractive design. The Extreme has a pleasing, if not striking design, but there are some areas that do feel quite basic, like the rough finish chrome brake pedal and the unsprung foot pegs, which are annoying while walking the bike or when you raise the side stand. We also noticed a couple of uneven panel gaps on the Hero, and all this makes the TVS feel better put together. Both the bikes feature LED daytime running lights and LED tail lamps, but the main headlamps are halogen powered. Overall, the Apache is more in sync with the demands of a younger crowd, while the Extreme is likely to appeal to a more mature audience. In terms of instrumentation, the Extreme features a semi-digital console with a large analog rev counter. The digital section has a speedometer, trip meter, odometer, service due indicator, fuel gauge and a clock. On the TVS, you'll find an all-digital console with more comprehensive features such as a lap timer and a top speed recorder. This is in addition to the standard fare, and it also gets a side stand indicator, which is a useful addition.
Now bear in mind that both of these are premium commuters, and that means they have to have comfortable seating positions. The Hero is actually very upright and you can sit in that position for long hours on end. The only complaint really is a firm seat. The Apache on the other hand, also comfortable but slightly more sporty with higher set foot pegs and a slight lean down to the bars. Now this is not a problem for anyone, but tall riders like myself will eventually start to notice that your legs are slightly higher up and the whole riding position is a little more compact. What I like about the Apache though is that from the rider's point of view, this area with the digital dash and the nicer black finish around here, it just feels more premium than the Hero can manage.
Spicing things up on the daily commute is what both these bikes have been designed for, but each takes their own approach even when it comes to the power plants.
So the TVS engine is definitely the smaller one here and by a fair margin. But what TVS is doing is they're using higher technologies like an oil cooler and a 4-valve head to make up the difference. Now while this is a carbureted motorcycle, you can also spend a little more and get the optional fuel-injected engine. Hero on the other hand will simply tell you that there's no replacement for displacement. But while that engine is bigger, it's also a lot simpler and is only an air-cooled setup with a 2-valve head. But on the whole, while the TVS is the most powerful 160 you can buy, the Hero makes almost 2 horsepower more.
On the move, the Extreme 200R feels slightly peppier at low revs and at urban speeds. Now this is definitely down to its higher power and torque figures, but the bike is also running rather short gearing, which makes it feel more urgent at lower speeds. Both use a 5-speed transmission, and the Hero's is much nicer with slick and crisp shifts, while the Apache's gearbox has a softer feel that isn't as positive. The Hero also has better throttle response, but we were surprised to find that the VBOX test figures reveal a very slim difference in outright performance. In all our acceleration tests, the Hero had a slight advantage, but the TVS was never far off. Where the TVS motor actually scores is that it feels noticeably more refined, especially closer to its redline. The Extreme gets quite vibey above 7000 RPM, and it's not as relaxed as the TVS at higher speeds. Thanks to the shorter gearing, high-speed cruising is not a strong point for the Hero. 100 km/h arrives at just under 8000 RPM on the Extreme, which is only about 1000 RPM away from the redline. The TVS holds the same speed with more ease, and it can exceed 120 km/h on the clocks without too much effort, while the Hero struggles to cross 115. To top it all, the TVS is also more efficient than the Hero, both within the city and out on the highway. The TVS impresses with its performance, but there's nothing surprising about the way the bike handles. RTRs have always been entertaining handlers, and the new one is no less. At low speeds, the RTR 160 feels light and agile, but its turning radius isn't as tight as the Extremes, which does reduce its ability to filter through heavy traffic. On the upside, we notice that the RTR feels a little more pliant and comfortable over bumps than the Hero at slower speeds. But the Extreme is no slouch when it comes to dynamics either.
The first ride event of this motorcycle was at the Budh International Circuit, which we originally thought was a very ambitious move from Hero. But what it did is it showed that they've built a very competent chassis, and that's actually one of my favorite aspects of this motorcycle. Now at low speeds, it is a little firmer than the RTR, but at high speeds, I think it absorbs bumps better, and this bike also feels more stable. Handling wise, we know from the track, it's great fun, but it's not super agile. It's just stable, confident, and it always works with you. When you show this bike the right road, it can actually put a smile on your face.
In the tyre department, we found that the TVS Remoras were quite nice on the RTR, but the Hero goes one up by offering wider tyres with a radial on the rear. However, where the Hero scores a clear win is in the braking department. The front brake offers much better feel and power than the TVS, and the RTR cannot generate as much confidence, and the braking figures do reflect this. Riding the TVS and Hero back to back reveals what a different approach they've both taken to offering a quick and premium commuting experience. But ultimately, we do prefer one over the other.
Now here's how things stack up. The Extreme 200R makes for a punchy motorcycle to ride through traffic and also presents exceptionally good value. But the RTR really sprung a surprise on us. Its performance is right in the ballpark of the Extreme 200R and it's just a little off here and there. Fuel efficiency wise, this bike is better. It also feels better built, more premium, more sporty and more engaging to the rider. The only downside we can see right now is that TVS still hasn't given this bike ABS, but we hope that will be corrected soon. If you can wait till TVS gives this bike ABS, and that shouldn't be too long, it's definitely the one we recommend between these two.
We've come to the Booth International Circuit to drive a Volkswagen Vento. But this is not the family car that you're familiar with. It is the more aggressive, the more powerful, track-focused version, the Vento TC4A. This car is tailor-made as per the guidelines of the Indian Touring Car Championships. And the most interesting bit is that Volkswagen Motorsport will actually sell you this car. So how much does it cost? And how does it perform in its natural habitat on the track? We find out while doing some hot laps. It's going to be exciting. With the driver in place, it weighs just around 1150 kilos. It's completely stripped down, so it loses the seats, carpets, aircon and all other dead weight. But what you have is all the essentials for a racing car. Like you have this roll cage, you have this sport seats which is really holding me in place. There's this 4-point seat belt harness, this sport steering wheel and this sequential manual transmission. What's also cool is the optional digital instrument cluster with a very cool F1 car-like gear shift indicator. Powering this car is the same E888 1.8-litre turbo petrol engine that we've earlier experienced in the Amio Cup car. In this Vento though, power delivery is more aggressive and it makes 5 horsepower more. Because of ITC regulations, its air inlet is restricted to 30 mm, thus limiting its max power and max torque. You're using the clutch only to start off. After that, you just pull down to shift up and push up to shift down a gear. This engine is really loud. It feels as if I'm sitting right under the bonnet right now. You know, one thing I can tell you is right off the bat, this car explodes. It doesn't accelerate. Look at this! The throttle response is just so sharp. The top end especially is much stronger than the Amio Cup car. On the long straights of the BIC, this car is easily capable of some ludicrous speeds. It is fast! It is totally fast! Every gear shift is just so aggressive. Check out this! You can actually feel the car go into gears. And while slowing down, it automatically flips the throttle, so it's automatically rev matching. There's no rear wing like the Amio, but you don't need one to be honest. The Vento's wider rear track, tweaked suspension and the longer wheelbase does the trick. The grip around corners is phenomenal. The MRF slick tires are fantastic and these just latch onto the tarmac. It's holding onto the ground like a leech. The steering is nicely talking to me. I know exactly what the front slick tires are doing and how much grip is going in the front and how much at the rear. It's changing direction like a fly. Woohoo! The minute you touch the brakes, they set speed like that. Credit goes to the massive 334mm discs in the front and the smaller discs at the rear. The steering, braking and throttle are so communicative that it infuses confidence in the driver to push harder and harder without being intimidated by its performance or sound.
There's no AC. I don't need one when I'm having so much fun.
So what's the price to pay? Well, it's approximately Rs 24 lakh for the base car. What you get for your money is a fast, fun racing car. You get the 1.8 litre engine with a 6-speed H-pattern manual, slick tires, sport seats, racing harness and a roll cage. By the time you finish ticking all the optional extras like the sequential manual gearbox, race ABS and digital instrument cluster, you're looking at a price of Rs 40 lakh. Yes, Rs 40 lakh for a Vento that you can't even drive on the street. But then this car isn't about practicality. Think of this car as a hardcore track weapon that's high on reliability and it's backed by the expertise of the Volkswagen Motorsport team.
If you are into racing and you plan to participate on a regular basis in the Touring Car Championships, I guess this is one of the best ways you can spend your money.